Hey mamas, welcome to the Mom Chat Show where we talk all things motherhood and we keep it real, raw, and honest. And me and my new besties, we're ready to share it all with you. Yes, you heard right. All of it, the mistakes, the trial and errors, the ups, the downs, the emotional roller coasters, and the happy times too. So if you're ready to laugh, cry, learn, and just have a good time, then this is your podcast show. You're my people. Let's chat. So welcome to Mom Chat Show. I am so excited about our amazing guest. She is just, honestly, she's awesome. What she does is amazing. And I feel like after we go through motherhood, we often struggle with this thing that we're about to talk about. And I feel like it's going to change your life and change mine as well. I'm so excited to hear what she has to say. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talking to you and all of the moms out there. I love this space that you have created for moms. It is so needed. And the work that you are doing in this space is incredible. My name is Jane Pilger, and I am a binge eating and body trust coach. So basically, I help women create a freedom from food, freedom from feeling out of control around food, and really help them to tune in and to connect with their bodies and to be able to trust themselves and develop that connection that generally is not at all present when binge eating is occurring.
Yes, which is so important. So I would love to know your story. Like, what led you down this path? What made you decide that, you know what, this is a field that I need to do. It's important. And I have to do it. What was that thing?
Yeah, well, I think like many of us, so many of us end up helping people through challenges or struggles that we've experienced before. And that's exactly my story. Kind of we hear the term turn your mess into your message. And I really feel like binge eating was a mess for me for decades, probably over 25 years. I struggled with binge eating. My very first binge was my first semester in college. I was away at college. I had been dieting pretty heavily before that. I didn't really know how to deal with my emotions. I was away from all my, kind of my trusted relationships, and I just didn't know how to deal. And I had my first binge, and I proceeded to spend decades trying to stop this terrible thing that I was doing. I had so much shame, so much judgment, and I was terrified to tell anybody what was happening or what I was doing. I was somebody who on the outside was very well put together, was, seemingly had all kinds of success and had things really figured out. And so the idea that what I was doing, I felt so out of control and so broken that I did not want anybody to know what I was doing. And so I kept it a secret while also trying to stop it and trying to figure out what was going on. But what I didn't realize was so much of what I was doing to try to stop it was actually keeping myself in the cycle and kind of perpetuating all of that. And so over the years, I went through eating disorders therapists. I went through 2 rounds of intensive outpatient therapy. I was married before I even told my husband about it. And I would have these periods of success where I thought like, okay, I've got this figured out. And then I would, kind of revisit the struggle again and be, kind of right back into my patterns and my behaviors. And what I really discovered for me was one of the missing pieces was really cultivating that safety and trust with myself, with my body, being able to be with myself, be with my body. And that was really kind of missing before. So I did a lot of work in really understanding and working with my nervous system, really getting to know more myself, my body, my needs, and really kind of incorporating all of those things that like really helped kind of guide me to a much more nurturing, honoring relationship with myself and with my body. And then I think through that, I knew that if I could figure this out, I wanted to take whatever I learned and pay it forward and to help other people, because so many people are struggling with this. in silence and alone because there is so much shame and judgment involved. And so the ability to be able to talk to other people about it and let them know that you aren't alone, you are not broken. There's a very good reason why you do what you do with food sometimes. And just to be able to start to see it in a new way can help open you up to different understanding and kind of a different perspective, then can help you come at it from a different way to unwind it rather than trying to hate it or pretend it's not there or wish it was gone.
Before I say what I was thinking, your story is so relatable. And then, for one, it's powerful because it just shows that life happens and then it creates so many different things after all of those things start to take place. So I love that you said that because life is something else sometimes. And I completely understand that because I went through the same process of, you're going through all these changes and you're trying to process it. And in the midst of doing that, you start to create a habit. And then that habit becomes a pattern. And then now you're just like, on the cycle of going through all these emotions and trying to just understand what's taking place.
Yes. And it's exactly what happens with moms too, right? Because when we have these big transitions, so for me, my big transition was going to college. I was away from home for the first time. I was experiencing these big emotions that I didn't really know how to deal with. And moms, I am not a mom. So I cannot pretend to understand what it is like to be a mom because I am not a mom. But I do know that it is a huge transition. And not only is it a big transition physically, it's a big transition emotionally. You also have the hormones and everything else that's happening and the sleep and all of these other factors are happening. It's like, it makes sense that one would turn to food amidst so many of these different changes and these things seemingly out of your control and the lack of sleep and the lack of knowing what's going on with your child and all of these other things. It makes so much sense. But when it's like, can't meet ourselves with that in that time, if we can't meet ourselves with that kind of resonant compassion of like, oh, of course, this is hard. It makes sense that you would feel this way. It makes sense that you would be turning to food or looking to this for that reason. It's like we just think like, oh, I'm so gross. I'm disgusting. I can't believe I did that. And that shame and that judgment keeps us really kind of in the cycle because we just want to get away from all this nasty language that's happening inside internally. So then that kind of just keeps us going back into the pattern.
That is so accurate. You explained it to the T. It really is like this ongoing emotion. I always say it's emotional roller coaster that we're just going up and down, up and down. And it can be really hard when you're just starting out as a mom because you don't understand any of it. Everything's new and you're just like, what is wrong with me? Something's wrong. When in actuality, nothing's really wrong. It's just your body's changing, your mind is changing, and it's happening so quickly. You're having a hard time like taking all of it in at one time. So we start to like guilt trip ourselves and make ourselves feel horrible for something that was completely out of our control. It's something that's going to happen. We just have to kind of slowly be aware of it and embrace it at the same time, which could be hard when it's something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So yeah, I get you a lot on that.
Yes. And we have these idealized expectations, right? So for a new mom, this idealized expectation of, okay, here's what is going to happen. Here's what my delivery is going to look like. And then as soon as I deliver, I am going to get right back into exercise. And then I'm going to be back into my pre-pregnancy jeans before this time. And it's all planned out, like these idealized expectations. And when we don't meet them, because we're human and we're going through the emotion and we have really hard days and whatever else, when we don't meet them, then we use that to beat ourselves up even further, which then keeps us back in the cycle, instead of sometimes we just have to meet ourselves with this is really hard. And it is hard. We can do hard things, but when we can meet ourselves in the hard and acknowledge that it's hard, There's such a difference between meeting yourself in the hard, being with yourself in the hard, and escaping yourself because you think you can't handle it. And I'm here to tell you, if you have had a child, no matter how that child came out of your body, if you have had a child, you can handle hard things, right? So it's like you can handle the hard things. It's when we tell ourselves that we can't handle it, we can't do it, and we use the food to escape, to disconnect, to kind of prove to ourselves that we can't do it. That's when we just give away all our power. And then we do feel powerless. We feel like the food has so much power over us. But the reality is we give the food the power in thinking we can't do it. I can't, I'm not capable. I have no control, those types of things. But I will say there is a caveat there, and that is this. If you are not eating enough food, if you are trying so desperately to get back to your pre-pregnancy weight that you are not eating enough food to sustain what your body needs, and if you are breastfeeding, your baby needs, then your body has a very natural survival response, and it will take over with making sure it gets enough food. So if you think you might be maybe going a little overboard on the dieting, on the trying to get back to it, and you find yourself kind of in these moments of feeling out of control, almost like you can't help it, like you can't get enough food, that could be a sign that you are restricting. Your brain is perceiving potentially a threat. So whether it is actual starvation threat or whether it's you are somebody who, like so many of us women, have been on many, many, many diets, when the brain starts to perceive this could be a diet, it's like, oh no, we're not going to go there again. There can be almost like this PTSD response that then has us wanting to actually eat more food. So I just want that caveat in there because there are a lot of different reasons why you might be binging. And by binging, I really mean just like kind of feeling out of control around food sometimes. Like sometimes you can't stop, maybe eating large quantities of food in a short period of time, often alone, often in hiding. So you might be off like trying to kind of like eat a lot while the baby's sleeping or while everybody else is upstairs or that type of thing. There are a lot of different reasons why. I identify 8 different reasons why people binge. And then each of those reasons has its own solution. So there may be reasons from emotional, like coping, right? If your ability to deal with big emotions maybe is not so great. So you have a small, what I call an emotional capacity. That could be one of them. But also what I was just talking about with the restriction. If you are not eating enough food, then the other things like looking at the habit, looking at the emotions, using it for coping, those other types of things, making sure your body gets enough food for its survival, it's like the number one thing you have to address first. And then there's kind of all these other layers and things you can look at if this is something that's happening for you.
Yes, I was thinking a lot of those things you were saying. I was like, okay, the emotional thing, definitely. And then as for the restrictive and the yo-yo of, oh my goodness, I want to get back to the old weight. I don't look how I used to look. That is like something I hate it, but moms go through, especially when it's your first child and your body's changing, you're not used to those changes and you're just trying to fight that constantly. Like your body is probably actually gorgeous, but mentally, you're so used to looking at this old body that you keep fighting to get back to the old body. And that is something that is horribly bad for moms. And I try to tell them all the time that you want to like try your hardest to embrace the new body, because the longer it takes for that, you start to get sometimes into depression and so many other things start to pop up because you're fighting how you look now. And the sad thing is that there's nothing wrong with having a new body. And when you beat up the new body, it makes it even harder to start getting to know the body, loving how it looks, understanding the new curves and the new things that are taking place in the body. It takes a long time to build that confidence up when we keep fighting it. So yes. I love that you said that, because sometimes we have triggers
and things that we're constantly, either it could be outside triggers or it could be triggers that we're actually forming. So I love that she broke that down because it's so real, and I've been through it, and I know so many other moms that have too.
Yes. And you're the way that you talk about it is so accurate, right? It's a fight with your body. It feels like a fight. And anytime we're in a fight, there's going to be tension, right? And it's like, no, what we're really looking for is connection with your body. Yes, your body is different. It is, but that doesn't mean it's not your body. And it doesn't mean it's not still able and capable of communicating with you, letting you know what it needs. And the more you can shift into working with your body, being in partnership with your body, then you will be more willing to listen to what it's telling you. Listen to communicate. Okay, what is going on? What's happening here? What are the needs? And it can be a challenge when you have a little one to take care of who has a whole lot of needs also. Figuring all of that out. I mean, moms are incredible. I sit and watch my friends who are moms, and I watch other people just out in the world who are moms. And I have so much respect for what moms do and what moms have to do in really figuring out, okay, how do I not only meet, nurture, and take care of the needs of these little ones, but how do I also meet, nurture, and take care of my own needs and make sure that whatever I'm doing isn't at the expense of myself? And that is a journey in and of itself. But if we go on that journey in fighting with this body that we're inhabiting, it's going to be so much harder to even tune in and even be aware of what our needs are, how our body might be communicating to us about the way that we are treating it or the way that we are showing up in this body that we have. And it is true that, a woman's body, once they have a child, is going to be different, but a woman's body is also going to be different as they age. All of our bodies, like none of our bodies are designed to be the same. So it's so interesting, right? It's like we have this, not we, because I'm not a mom, but I see so often people have this idea of like, I just want the body I had back then, either before I got pregnant, maybe when I was 18, 10 years ago, when I was in this particular place or space. It's like the body is not designed or meant to be the same shape, size, weight, composition throughout life. But somehow, somewhere, probably through media, we get this idea that's like, no, we are actually supposed to look exactly the same the whole time. It's so weird. And it's that idea that then has us fighting with ourselves, because when the body does change, then we're resisting it instead of like, all right, here's my body today. What can I do with this body today? What can I do for this body today? How can I stay connected with it? Because when we're binging, it is an act of disconnecting from ourselves emotionally, disconnecting from ourselves physically. I used to say that binging for me was like I was turning the lights off on myself. Like, okay, I don't want to hear what's going on up here. I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. I just learned to use food to turn the lights off on myself. And so now it's like, okay, I want the lights on as much as possible. And if there ever is a time where I do end up turning the lights off on myself, then it's like, okay, how do I get those lights back on as quick as possible? Because nobody's capable of really keeping the lights on all the time. Our nervous system kind of takes care of that, right? Through our fight, flight, freeze response, all of those other things, like that's going to happen. That's part of being a human. But if we can go through the process with the goal of being connected and in communication, and trusting that our body's going to be able to let us know what's going on so that then we can respond. It's just like your kids. Your kids let you know what's happening, so then you can respond, right? It may not all be rainbows and daisies, but they let you know. Our bodies do the same thing. We just don't listen. We've like conditioned ourselves to stop listening to our bodies through dieting mostly, through ignoring our hunger signals, through pushing through fatigue, through all the other things that we do. But the body's always communicating with us. And if we can listen and figure out, okay, what is that communication? What is the need? It's just like you do as a mom with your children. Okay, you listen, you get to know, okay, this means that. In the beginning, it's confusing. I don't even know what this means. I just know there's a need. It's the same with your body. When you start connecting with and you start kind of tuning in, it's like, okay, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. But just like you as a mom, you get to know, oh, I know that cry. That cry means I need to change a diaper. That cry means I'm really upset. I'm cold. I'm whatever. Or maybe you don't always know, and that's okay too. But you do know when there's a need. Your body tells you the same thing. Our bodies are brilliant. Children are such beautiful examples of what it's like to just inhabit your body, to have big emotions, to let them process, and then they move on to the next thing. They don't hold on to them. They didn't get the message yet that these emotions are not okay. They just express. They're in their bodies with whatever lumps and bumps happen to be on their bodies. It's a beautiful, as a mom, you can really look to your children and how they inhabit their bodies and how their bodies actually do communicate their needs. You can see that is a skill innately in all of us. We've conditioned ourselves out of it, but it's still there and we can still get back to that, which is pretty incredible. So as a mom, you can use your kids as little examples for you, like little teachers. You don't have to be the only teacher in this relationship.
Oh my goodness, you unpacked so many things that I was just like, yes, yes, and yes again. I'm pretty sure you saw my head going up and like, oh my gosh, she's so accurate. But the thing that I wanted to ask you is, what if there is a mom out there that is potentially kind of, hitting some of the things you mentioned, such as restriction, emotional eating, and she's kind of like going through that cycle? What would you recommend her to do in those beginning stages to kind of, change that path that she's going and start the ways of potentially healing and feeling better and preventing herself from going on the ongoing cycle of keeping that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the number one key for any form of change is awareness. So just becoming aware of what's happening for you. If you resonate with anything that you've been hearing today and you find like, oh yes, like this is me, or, oh, I see myself there. Number one, good for you for seeing it, just recognizing and acknowledging it. Definitely the number one place. And the next thing I would do is, if this is something that is a place for you that's like, yeah, this is a struggle. This is something I really, would like to kind of identify or unpack a little bit more. I have a podcast that's called Binge Breakthrough. And on the Binge Breakthrough podcast, in the very beginning, on the first episode, I shared my own personal story. But then in episodes 2 and 3, I went through the 8 reasons why you binge, and then the 8 solutions as to each of those reasons. Then there's an episode on each of the solutions to go into a little bit more detail. What I love to do is help people to see their eating behaviors in a new way. Because if you see it as something terrible, awful that you do, that you need to just stop, that is going to be that fight, right? That shame, that judgment. It keeps a lid on any possibility for you to kind of really see what might be underneath. So what I like to say is that a binge is not the eating itself. It's more of a symptom. So a binge is like a light on the dashboard. It is telling you there's something going on underneath the hood. So we don't just look at the light and try to cover up the light with duct tape. We get under the hood and we say, okay, what's going on under here that's making that light come on? So most people just look at the food. It's like, okay, well, if I just stop eating after, this time, or I cut out this food, or I do this, then I'll stop. It's like, no, that's actually not the case. What we need to do is lift the hood and see what's going on there so that we can figure that out. And if we figure that out, the binge light will turn off on its own. We don't have to place so much focus on the food itself. But shame and judgment about the behavior, it's like putting a 50-pound block on top of your car hood. We can't even get under the hood to see what's going on in the first place to be causing that light to come on. And the way to get rid of shame and judgment is understanding, curiosity, compassion, getting curious. And a lot of the podcast really will walk you through what that looks like. How do I get curious instead of just beating myself up? So it might offer some insights, some ideas, some perspectives that you haven't even considered before as it relates to, kind of what happens with food. So I think that would be just a great resource, is the podcast.
Amazing. Simply amazing. And I say that because I think sometimes we just need to know, for one, that someone understands what we're going through. And then two, that it's fixable. I think that's the hardest thing for us moms, is to admit that we're going through something. And a lot of the times, I hate to say this, we mentally feel like it's never going to be fixed and I have to control it. I have to do something to make it better. When in actuality, it's okay to be vulnerable and say, I need help. And to know that there's a source out there that can help you. So I am so glad you said that, and that your podcast is out there, because that is needed, and it's needed to help us understand it too. That's the biggest thing.
Yes. And help is possible. It really is. This is not something you have to deal with for the rest of your life. And what you said is exactly what people do, is try to control it. And the more we try to control, the harder it is to actually let go. And it's the trust. That trust is really the opposite of control. We learn how to communicate, how to trust our bodies, to trust ourselves. Then we can start to let go of some of that really tight grip that sometimes ends up keeping us in the pattern in the first place.
So that was my last question. So I would like to know if there's any a message or anything that you would like to leave them with before we finish out.
Yeah. The message really is, you are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. There is a perfectly good reason why you do what you do with food. It makes sense. And if you can get curious about how it makes sense, then you can get curious and uncover the path to figure out what's happening underneath your hood, so that light will go off.
So I would love to know, how can they find you? They want to talk to you, get more information, potentially even work with you dealing with this type of situation. How could they contact you?
So my podcast is called Binge Breakthrough, and it is available on every major podcast platform. And then my website is janepilger.com. And I am on Instagram and Facebook, both at Jane Pilger Coaching.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on here with me. I have learned so much. I love bringing on guests that teach me and they teach my listeners something new so that they can feel better and potentially get through whatever they're going through, because we're always going through something. So we always need another source, another person that can either motivate us or make us feel better. And you definitely gave all of that. So I appreciate you for coming on here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was so great to talk to you and all of your listeners today.
That's it, mamas. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me on the Mom Chat Show. And I would love to connect with you more. So to make sure of that, click that follow button and also follow us on Mom Chat Show on Instagram, where I will talk to y'all again next week. Bye, mamas.